Now, this is one of our strategic strands which we're working on, but we're on the right track. This is why the operations peace maintenance and specific initiatives of the United Nations have to include young people. A peaceful world will only be a reality if young people help to shape this process. But for there to be the effective involvement of young people, we have to put the emphasis on questions of radicalization, on extremism, because without that we will fail. And we do not wish to fail or founder, because we're talking about the young people, the next generation, their involvement and international solidarity, international civic mindedness, and international intergenerational solidarity essential for creating a world which is fair, peaceful, serene, and, of course, resilient. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Muchas gracias por esa intervención. Mina, over to you.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Mr. Santiago, for those really powerful remarks. You are absolutely right. Human rights is at the center of the work that we do, and we're really excited to see how Mexico is going to take this agenda forward. Katrina, I'm going to turn it over to you with a question. As a young person yourself, you have been using your networks to nurture strong relationships and mobilize young people across your country for YPS. How exactly have you been engaging young people in shaping Canada's YPS strategy?
Merci Nina et Leonardo pour votre accueil ce matin.
Thank you very much for your kind welcome this morning.
Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security. We're a nationwide youth-led and youth-driven network in Canada, working to advance the YPS agenda at home and Canadian engagement in the agenda abroad. Donc, nous travaillons ensemble pour l'avancement de l'agenda.
So we're working for the young peace and security agenda.
Our coalition was conceptualized and created in August 2020. So in less than 2 years of our existence, we've been able to contribute significantly to the advancement of YPS at a country level. I'm incredibly proud of this and happy to share some of this with you. As we know, young people around the world have been grappling with the question of institutionalizing the YPS agenda for some time, and this has also been the case in Canada. Several of us have been hesitant to delve into formal processes, while others have begun to operationalize the resolutions through existing policy frameworks and commitments by governments. The Canadian Coalition is an example of the latter. Donc, nous avons choisi de concentrer,
So we decided to focus on the agenda of the coalition and existing political promises and of open
call for submissions following the Foreign Affairs Minister's announcement of the development of a white paper on Canadian feminist foreign policy. Our coalition's government advocacy working group gathered and prepared an official submission calling for the feminist foreign policy to integrate strong YPS provisions. This included challenging the concept of empowerment as a top-down approach rather than the preferable bottom-up strategy, in line with a localized peacebuilding discourse, with strong diversity in the meaningful inclusion of LGBTQ+ young people, and a particular attention to the intersectional identities of young Black and Indigenous and people of color. The Canadian Coalition emphasized the importance of YPS provisions in the feminist foreign policy, including in the new iteration of Canada's soon-to-be third National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. We have been incredibly proud to find allies in the WPS space, both within our government and civil society structures. This demonstrates the need for critical intersectional understanding and analysis of policy, which is highlighted by the third YPS resolution, number 2535, which is primordial, of course, to the YPS agenda. Another thing that we've done is the work on tokenization, and we prefer to call it de-tokenization of young people. So we've identified tokenization of young people as a barrier to peace and core to the violence of exclusion being challenged by our members. The tokenization of young people throughout these institutionalization processes has been at the forefront of the debate for quite some time. We as young people are often seen as a passive actor, or our inclusion as a box-ticking exercise. Following the significant attention brought to this issue by young peacebuilders, the CCYPS launched 3 global online research efforts. One in July, supported by Taking It Global's Youth Rising grant, which was initiated by the Canada Service Corps, and 2 in November and December of 2021, which we just wrapped up, supported by UN Women. The purpose was to identify the impacts and experiences of young people in civic spaces, as well as solutions from young people to these critical problems. We're now in the process of developing a toolkit on how to detokenize young people in civic and decision-making spaces. This has been met with overwhelming support from our government and other international and civil society actors. With the tokenization and substantive exclusion of our voices, several young people and young peace builders in Canada and elsewhere choose not to engage in the systems, but rather to tackle social change and implementation of YPS principles at a community level. When considering institutionalization efforts for the implementation of the YPS agenda, these specific young people should be at the forefront of policy development and considerations. This was something we overwhelmingly heard during these research sessions that we held. Their constant contributions to peace and security efforts at a grassroots level is what will sustain the eventual operationalization of policy commitments and government promises. This is why we're so excited to be joining you today for this launch and as contributors to the operationalization guidelines. Merci, thank you, miigwech.
Mercy, Katrina, for your intervention, and I really appreciate that you touch upon detokenizing the participation of young people in the construction of peace, and that's something that we really need to keep in mind moving forward, and especially when developing these national plans. And I think this is a perfect segue to hear about Mridul. Mridul, you were part of the team that developed the guide, for which you have convened a series of consultations with young people. What did you hear in these consultations? How will young people like to see YPS agenda translated into practice in their own territories?
Sure, thanks, Leo. So basically, we had 95 entities involved to develop these guidelines, and 42% were youth. With my peer, Mikhail, we engaged around 40 youth-led entities through interviews, written inputs, and consultations. They were very rich insights, and here I would like to share 3 of them with you about awareness, inclusion, and support. So the first thing, awareness. Young people overall experience that there is limited knowledge of the agenda among policymakers. Further, there are deprioritization and limited commitment to act on YPS. It leads to lack of funding, one-off projects, tokenistic or selective youth participation, and no recognition for youth leadership in peace building. Because of this, youth do not get to discuss with policymakers their priorities and aspirations for YPS operationalization. It has been more than 6 years. While youth were supposed to be included and supported by the government to build and sustain peace through YPS implementation, youth still end up spending a lot of efforts and resources in just making the policymakers and public aware of YPS agenda and meaningful youth engagement. And this happens even when youth anyway have limited access to fund. Now, second point about inclusion. So even where the operationalization of YPS agenda is happening, the degree of youth participation varies from extremely positive co-led processes in some countries to youth exclusion or engagement only through what many consider to be inadequate consultation processes. This is due to lack of formal commitment to youth inclusion, lack of institutional infrastructure, severe power dynamics in multi-stakeholder exchanges, and lack of freedom to engage in civic and political spaces. These young people want to engage, but they want to do so safely and be taken seriously. Further, the implementation processes often haven't been able to engage leaders of youth-led social movements or gender non-conforming and non-urban youth beyond very selective country consultations. Now, we cannot afford to exclude youth from the processes when we try to address youth exclusion itself. Otherwise, the gap between the young people's aspirations and the realities of implementation may foster mistrust, dissatisfaction, and lack of confidence in governments. Additionally, including youth voices in policy development processes is not enough if it is not matched by youth participation in design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of YPS operationalization processes. Now, third thing is about support. So many young people and youth-led peace-building organizations have owned the YPS agenda, and we are already making efforts to operationalize it. but they rarely find support and resources for it. So first of all, positive narratives and successful stories of youth working in peace and security in general need to be spread through the media so that there is more trust, credibility, receptivity for young peace builders. And second, government should partner with these youth organizations and youth groups in order to reap the peace dividend. And partnerships should be well funded beyond the expectations of youth volunteerism. So overall, young people have multiple ideas on YPS implementation, but all converge on the need of sustained action with young people, investment, transparency, and accountability mechanisms. Certainly, youth participation comes with cost and obligations, including a need to commit to longer process, to create intergenerational spaces, to invest in listening to diverse young people's voices, and to commit to power sharing and co-creation with youth. But it is certainly preferable to have a youth inclusive process, even if it is slow. So once meaningful collaborations are forged, a lot is already achieved for YPS implementation. Thank you.
That was a fantastic discussion. Thank you, Mridul, for walking us through what you heard directly from young people. And this is a really great transition to the next portion of our conversation, where I would love to invite Ms. Selena Del Feliz to the floor to present her work as leading author of the new guide we are launching today as part of the conference's outputs. That is implementing the Youth Peace and Security Agenda at the country level, a guide for public officials. Ms. Feliz is a youth peace and security expert with a breadth of diverse and unique experiences working on YPS. She will explain to us how issues and lessons gathered in the first part of the session are reflected in the guide's contents and chapters and how you can use it in your work. Ms. Feliz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nina. Distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, dear participants, it is my honor to present to you this guide on behalf of the team, because it was a team that developed it. It is a guide specifically developed for public officials, but we think it's also of relevance for all those engaged in implementation efforts at national and local levels. It was the result of collective efforts, indeed. We want to especially thank the partners that made it possible. The Folke Bernadotte Academy of Sweden that provided technical and financial support, the State of Qatar that provided financial support, and the key partners that coordinated and shared all their expertise and valuable insights. The Office of the Secretary General Envoy on Youth, the United Nations Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Peacebuilding Support Office, the United Nations Population Fund, Search for Common Ground, and the United Network of Young Peacebuilders. We are also grateful to all those that participated in the consultations. As Mridul said, we engaged 95 entities, out of which 35 were member states and 40 were youth-led groups and organizations. And we also consulted with regional organizations and civil society organizations, different parts of the UN system. And we also want to thank the Special Task Force of the Global Coalition on Youth Peace and Security that provided inputs and reviewed drafts. Time does not allow me to mention all that contributed to this process and this output, but I want to stress that it was a truly collaborative and collective effort. And the design of this guide was like building a puzzle, really. There were multiple content pieces to be included and different perspectives to be taken into account. And we think that this idea of collective puzzle making can be a way to imagine and approach the implementation processes in your countries and your roles in it. Because we need all the pieces, we need all the perspectives, and we need dialogue and collaboration to put it all together in a shared vision with clear goals and the means to achieve them. Through the process of developing this guide, we also learned about the many implementation efforts. And these efforts were documented from the formalization of the agenda with the adoption of UN Security Council 2250 in 2015, by the report issued by the Secretary General in 2020, in March 2020. And we also conducted a mapping exercise in which we identified more than 200 initiatives. So the guide builds on these existing practices as we can learn a lot from them. And we also have to acknowledge and note that this agenda is also rather new, and there are many shifts, cultural shifts, political shifts that are needed and are happening. And these practices are breaking new ground. So implementation is underway, yet there are still very important challenges ahead of us. And we hope that this guide helps, supports national stakeholders, especially public officials, to address them. So how does this guide work? It offers practical suggestions for action, tools, and examples. It does not aim to be a prescriptive tool or to offer one single model of implementation to be followed. This is important because putting the implementation puzzle together in each country will require the national stakeholders to consider the specific context, and context matters a lot. So this guide offers the overall main pieces to be put in place, and the national stakeholders will be the ones to decide based on their priorities, capacities, and needs, and importantly, those of young people in all of their diversity. But what about the content? So the content is organized in 6 chapters, based also following the very specific recommendations of UN Security Council Resolution 2535 of 2020. And each chapter represents a key action area. And let me briefly take you through some of the main contents of these chapters. So as Miridu was saying, one of the main challenges that young peacebuilders face when they try to work with their governments is that they know little about the agenda. Not only they know little, but there is a limited understanding of the agenda. So this chapter introduces the 5 pillars of UN Security Council Resolution 2250, which is the seminal resolution. We know there are 2 others and other documents as well, but introduces firstly this, the main pillars, as we know: participation, protection, prevention, partnership, disengagement, and reintegration, and also defines the key concepts that underpin this agenda: youth, peace and security, meaningful youth participation. And these concepts need to be unpacked and discussed in each national context. And they need to help raise awareness among public officials about the relevance of this agenda. So one of the tools in this chapter is the context analysis. Chapter 2, if we outline the various ways to implement the YPS agenda. Starting with strategic planning processes, which can translate into roadmaps, national plans, and frameworks, which can involve many stakeholders. We also have a way to implement the agendas through different policies and programs, and importantly, not in many policy domains. And to date, most of the efforts have been led by ministries of youth and ministries of foreign affairs. But through the mapping exercise, we found initiatives undertaken by at least 10 different policy domains, as this very colorful graph illustrates. So, and also as we heard in the example from Mexico, it's an initiative implemented together by the Ministry of Health and the Mexican Institute of Youth. The implementation of the agenda can also be realized through specific projects and services. So these possibilities are not mutually exclusive. On the contrary, they need to be combined in each country's implementation plan or a puzzle. For example, a roadmap might include changes in different policy domains and a combination of specific projects. Chapter 3 is about coordination mechanisms, the importance of having clear mandates, dedicated focal points, and the need to coordinate internally within institutions, among ministries and agencies, as well as with other stakeholders, and ensuring meaningful youth participation in these mechanisms as well. Chapter 4 is dedicated to institutional capacities, the need for will and commitments within institutions, which need to translate into regular governmental capacity building practices. And we also have a section in which we suggest how young people can be partners in capacity building programs, when we know that young people are often the targets or beneficiaries of capacity building. But in this section, we illustrate how young people with expertise in the YPS agenda and various different types of knowledges can also help and partner when addressing building capacity with all stakeholders. Chapter 5 is about financial resources. As we have said, without resources, any plan remains a promise. And this includes mobilizing resources, managing resources, and also importantly, making resources available to youth-led groups and small ones, which we know are often at the forefront of peace initiatives and are very underfunded. And chapter 6, last but not least, explains key principles for ensuring participatory processes with young people. Because we have heard this term, meaningful youth participation, but what does it mean in practice? How do we include youth in all their diversity? So adopting intersectional approaches. How to work with different marginalized groups, young women migrants, young internally displaced persons, young people of different linguistic, gender, or ethnic minorities. This chapter also offers suggestions on how to improve intergenerational dialogue and trust. This is a key issue that we have heard already mentioned this morning, and how to ensure safe spaces, as those that have participated in the protection session earlier on, how key this is for enabling participation. And finally, the chapter mentions different examples of youth participation in peace and security spaces, those that are happening within institutions, and also those within consultative spaces, and those that are self-organized, shaped and led and run by young people. And the three are very important. So complementing the 5-year strategy on youth-inclusive peace processes that will be presented tomorrow, we hope that this guide supports officials in implementation in all countries, not only those experiencing armed conflict, but all countries, as all experience and face important peace and security challenges in this world that is more than ever interconnected, as we wanted to illustrate in this picture. And everywhere, young people have a lot to say and are already contributing, and they want to contribute more to solutions. We hope that the countries see how this agenda can reinforce and add value to their national priorities. For example, how young people's experiences can help shape their national development plans, their national peace and security plans. And also these agendas will be more effective if they harness the contributions of young people. And at the same time, advance shared and global agendas, such as the 2030 Agenda and the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, to name the main ones. We truly hope that this guide is useful and that it remains a living document to be updated and reworked, and we trust that implementation efforts will multiply in the coming months and years. And I thank you again, all those that contributed, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Celine, for your wonderful contribution. And this report definitely is a stepping stone to really start to implement these national plans and move the YPS agenda forward all over the world. Now, with that being said, I would like to transition to the next part of our discussion. And I would like to invite Marie-Rose and Riham to the floor to kickstart our discussion. Welcome, Marie-Rose and Riham. To start us with, I have a question for Riham. Your country, Jordan, has truly been a global champion of youth peace and security agenda, and you successfully tabled the first thematic resolution on YPS back in 2015. How are you working with the Jordanian YPS coalition to now domesticate this agenda? The floor is yours. In the meantime, we'll pass it over to Mary Rose, and we go back to you shortly, Riham. So for Mary Rose, our question for you is: how did you get started with working on the YPS agenda in the Democratic Republic of Congo? And based on your experience and what you have heard, what are the two things to keep in mind when starting a YPS implementation process at a country level? Mary Rose, I think we're not able to hear you. Can you please check your mic? So unfortunately, we're facing some issues with the microphones from our youth speakers, which is unfortunate. We're going to move on to the next part of our discussion. Mina, over to you.
Thank you, Leo. We will try later at the end of the session to come back to Mary Rose and Riham if we have time. But I would love to invite to the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Sunday Dare, the Federal Minister of Youth and Sports Development at the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports Development of Nigeria. Nigeria is the first country in Africa and second in the world to adopt a national action plan, and we would like to commend and celebrate you for engaging in this co-creation effort with young people. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. The high-level global conference on youth inclusiveness in peace process that we're having today, I think is very timely and also very critical. I hope you can hear me. Excellent. The Nigerian government and stakeholders have developed and launched a national action plan on youth peace and security, YPS, that is anchored on the 5 pillars of the United Nations 2250, as we know it. We're working with civil society and youth groups. We've also established the Nigerian Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, NCYPS, that is domiciled at my ministry, the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development. The NCYPS, through its co-chairs and steering committee, is leading the implementation of the YPS. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead, Your Excellency. We can hear you.
Thank you. In a bid to localize the UNSCR 2250 in Nigeria, the federal, in partnership with the Center for Sustainable Development and Education in Africa, CSDEA, and the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, IPCR, the Foreign Affairs, we launched the UNSCR 2250 in Abuja in October 2016 to bring attention to the issues of youth, peace, and security. And this marked a renewed focus on the YPS agenda in our country. The outcome of the launch was the establishment of a national working group, NWG, on youth, peace, and security, which later became the Nigerian Coalition on Youth, Peace, and Security, when the interagency working group on youth and peace building metamorphosed into the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace, and Security. So we've had some kind of transitions and movements that have deepened this process. Of course, we look forward to deepening the UPS agenda in Nigeria. The Coalition on Youth, Peace, and Security, its co-chairs, the steering committee, with the support of the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development, is leading in its full implementation. The Youth, Peace, Security, NAP 2021 to 2024 was developed to reflect and build upon the 5 pillars of the UNSCR 2250. That has now become the pilot phase of the implementation. And we have quite a number of states, Adamawa, Anambra, Delta, Kaduna, Oyo, Plateau, about 6 or 7 states in the pilot phase. And this is proceeding accordingly. We are hopeful that the implementation of the YPS will open, and NAP will open positive and sustainable opportunities for young people, including the space to express their talents and to contribute lasting peace and development to our great nation, Nigeria, and by extension, the sub-region. We also hope that international partners will support us in this bold endeavor, giving the opportunities for our youth to express their talents and also to contribute to lasting peace and also global peace. But beyond that, we found that quite a number of issues continue to dominate the full implementation and deepening of the youth, peace, and security. And one is what headlines this conference we're having today: political inclusiveness. It is critical. Most of our youth feel alienated and isolated from the political process. So there's no buying, whether it's peace and security, whether it's development, whatever it is, they just feel that they're out of the political beltway. And we must develop a template that gives them that sense of inclusivity. And in such a manner, they will be willing to engage fully when it comes to the processes that we set forth for peace and security. Second, we need to define platforms for engagement. The platforms can be temporary, but also we need to have concrete platforms. And we've talked about institutions. They must be able to identify institutions through which, when these engagements take place, they are processed into the system and they can impact the outcomes towards the overall agenda. Of course, I know there's a template for implementation. I just listened to the last previous report, quite detailed, and in fact, very granular. I've taken so many notes from that presentation. I hope at some point we're going to have that circulated to all of us. But I think that we must keep faith with the template for implementation, because there's a connection, not just with Nigeria, but several other countries across continents face similar challenges when it comes to peace and security, but especially the central role identified and declared for the youth to play. So having a uniform template for implementation, such that when we're comparing notes, it's going to be comparing oranges and oranges, not apples and oranges. We can learn lessons, we can develop models, we can adopt models, we can borrow models from other countries that have worked. Finally, I want to speak about what is the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room for me, as a minister that I found amongst our youth, working with them, has been the deficit, the trust deficit. The trust deficit. That is, whatever government presents, whatever government is involved in, there's this trust deficit. The youth just don't believe government. They don't believe that the youth will be allowed to participate fully and to own the process. They believe the government is so powerful that whatever their contribution and their role will only be on the fringes and will be infinitesimal and perhaps not even respected or recognized. And that's the tough challenge that we face. And constantly, it's a change of mindset that we need to do. But also, government is trying as much as possible to bridge this trust and deficit, such that the programs and the initiatives and projects of government that we roll out, whether they're tangential to peace and security, whether they're central to it, we'll make sure that they're transparent. We'll make sure that the youth are part of the conception, the execution, or the implementation of such projects. And we have seen in the last 2 years, that deficit being bridged. I think that's one big elephant in the room, that if we're able to eventually get the buy-in of most of our youth, where they find themselves, they will be willing to be ambassadors and to be advocates and activists. Some of them are also torn between the advocacy of youth peace and security or the activism of it. We need to also define that. It's a thin line, but it's important to define a model, the concept of the activism arm of peace and security and the advocacy arm, because that will help to bring a bit of clarity, also will help to bring some kind of method into what we want to
Your
achieve.
Excellency, I am so sorry to cut you off, but we are running close on time and we have to pass the mic to another colleague, but thank you. Thank you so much for your wonderful remarks. We are so inspired by the work you are doing in Nigeria. Leo, over to you to introduce our next speakers.
Thank you, Mina, and thank you, Your Excellency. It is a great motivation for all of us that you move forward with the National Action Plan on YPS in Nigeria. And now I would like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Yvette Vonkulu Zola, the Minister of Youth and National Cohesion of the Democratic Republic of Congo, for our closing remarks of the session.
Merci pour la parole. Leurs Excellences, les représentants du gouvernement, Madame l'envoyée spéciale du secrétaire des Nations Unies.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear partners, dear ministers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's for me a great honor to be able to say something during this high-level conference held in Doha for an inclusive peace process for the youth. I will tell you more about progress made in the implementation of Resolution 2050 on youth, peace and security in Congo. To start with, the interpreters are sorry, the sound is not very good. They're doing their best. We'd like to thank, to start with, all the participants. Our country has decided that youth inclusivity would be the most important thing for us to maintain peace and for national cohesion. Thus, the government of our country has rolled out a number of action plans along the lines of Resolution 2050. We've set up a National Technical Secretariat in charge of implementation for the implementation of Resolution 2050. The objective is to support the agenda of youth, peace and security in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The official launch of the national plan and the implementation of Resolution 2250 in the country is an essential moment for us. We will be the second country after Nigeria to have an action plan at national level. We've organized consultations through the National Council of Youth to update the national youth policy in Congo, and we will focus very much on the fight against violence, and we will focus on togetherness and peace. We will support a program for community integration, which consists in awareness, mobilization, and integration of the former fighters in the war zones in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The youth are the change agents in our country, and the presidency of the committee to roll out the women, youth, and security agenda in our regions. We also participate in many fora in the region, and also we work on the implementation of the law that protects the youth in our country, plus the creation of a center for volunteers, and we also promote intergeneration dialogue. The interpreters are very sorry. The sound is appalling. We're doing our best. All of these achievements are the fruit of our efforts and what the youth have done, supported by the Ministry of Youth that I had. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to all of this, we've worked on the peace building in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but there are some challenges on the way to roll out the YPS agenda. These are internal and regional challenges, and this is also due to COVID-19 and the fact that there's a lack of security to the east of the country, which is under a siege, and also connected to the increase in unemployment among younger generations. So the implementation of Resolution 2250 is connected to what the YPS agenda, and this is a mechanism thanks to which the youth can develop and grow and contribute to the eradication of conflicts connected to the idea of security to the east of the country. But the Democratic Republic of Congo is also working on a program called Ton Avenir, Your Future, which leads to empowerment of the youth and youth as entrepreneurs. It's a great opportunity for us to thank our different partners at the United Nations who support us in the implementation of this National Action Plan. The Special Representative of the sector of the United Nations. We are sorry, we will have to interrupt you. We are sorry. Our country has committed to draft the national plan and has factored in ideas such as partnership and reintegration of the youth. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, everyone, for all your contribution. This shows how can we move forward with YPS at a national level. Amina.
Thank you, Leo, and thank you to your excellencies and all speakers in this session today. We are now going to transition to the official opening ceremony of the conference, and we will be with you shortly with that live stream. Thank you, everybody. We were given a world filled with suffering, cities in rubble, people divided, families in pain, our house on fire. We didn't choose the world we were given, but we do get to choose the world we want and the world we leave behind. Our generation is choosing to leave it better than we found it. We know that violence is a man-made problem, and that man-made problems require people-driven solutions. We imagine a world with less violence and more compassion. We imagine a world where everyone, regardless of their background, is seen, heard, and engaged. We are young peace builders on the front lines of violent conflict, working with communities to turn fear, misinformation, and suspicion into trust and truth. Not only are we the largest generation to ever exist, we are the most interconnected, and we don't turn a blind eye. From Qatar to DRC, Nigeria to Finland, Myanmar to Colombia, America to Afghanistan, we are mending what is broken, building community with our peers, and collaborating across generations to heal our collective wounds. The youth peace and security movement isn't asking you to compromise your values. We're asking you to meet us where we are. Understand our fears, hopes, and what drives us, and to just take a chance and work with us. We find ourselves sitting at an inflection point in history. We can choose to do business as usual, or we can seize this moment to rethink, reimagine, and build a more peaceful, just, and inclusive world. We do choose the world we want to build and the world we leave behind. Will you join us?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Wherever you are joining us today from, I hope you are well, you are safe, and you are taking care of yourself and others around you. My name is Jayatma Vikramanayaka, and I am the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you today to the high-level opening segment of the Global Conference on Youth Inclusive Peace Processes. Young people today often constitute the majority of population in countries where there are ongoing peace processes. So engaging with young people is not only a demographic necessity, but a democratic imperative. Emerging evidence shows us that youth participation can increase the legitimacy and the sustainability of peace processes. But to move from exclusion to meaningful inclusion, we must transform norms, practices, approaches, and attitudes, and recognize young people as equal and powerful partners who can positively contribute to all steps and aspects of peace processes. So throughout this conference, we will explore what strategies are needed to increase the inclusion of young people in peace processes, and also provide general guidance to member states, civil society, and youth organizations how to meaningfully implement the 3 Security Council resolutions on youth, peace, and security: 2250, 2419, and 2535. This conference itself is a multi-stakeholder initiative. In 2018, the governments of the state of Qatar, Finland, and Colombia came together to provide much-needed leadership to this movement in partnership with the United Nations, civil society organizations, and youth organizations. Therefore, to kickstart our conversation today, it's my pleasure to now pass the floor to our generous host for this important virtual conference, the state of Qatar, Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Your Excellency, Mr. Pekka Haavisto, Your Excellency, Mrs. Maria Juliana Ruiz Sandoval, Ms. Ana Manino, Mr. Mohammed Yahya Qani, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to open this high-level global conference on youth inclusive peace processes, co-hosted by the State of Qatar, Colombia, Finland, and the United Nations, and co-organized by the Office of the UN Secretary General Envoy on Youth, Education Above All Foundation, and Search for Common Ground in partnership with UN Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, the UN Population Fund, the UN Development Programme, and the United Network of Young Peacebuilders. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the groundbreaking vision of Her Highness Sheikh Moza bint Nasser, UN SDG advocate and founder and chairperson of Education Above All Foundation. Her Highness has worked tirelessly to promote the empowerment of youth in conflict prevention and peace building. I would also like to acknowledge the instrumental role of Education Above All in this regard. The State of Qatar encourages the participation of young people in all stages of peace processes, including decision-making. With this in mind, the Department of Youth Affairs and the Ministry of Sports and Youth has been directed to draft Qatar's first national youth strategy. Drafted in consultation with our youth, the strategy is a declaration of a common national vision that defines the needs and priorities of Qatar's youth. It's worthy of note that the first international symposium on youth participation held in Helsinki in March 2019 resulted in the launch of the first global policy paper on youth participation in peace processes. I trust this conference will follow this path in arriving at shared political commitments to advance global youth, peace and security agenda and deliver concrete solutions for sustainable youth inclusive processes worldwide. I'm pleased that this conference will launch international guidelines to advance the global youth peace and security agenda and a 5-year strategy on strengthening youth inclusive peace processes to be implemented at the national level. To conclude, the State of Qatar is committed to continue working closely with the United Nations to effectively implement main outcomes of this conference as part of our joint effort to strengthen global youth inclusive peace processes. I thank you all for joining us and look forward to our impactful deliberation here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Allow me to now turn to the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. Secretary General, I would now like to invite you to take the floor and reflect on what needs to be done to accelerate the implementation of the youth peace and security movement as an integral part of global peace and security efforts.
Excellencies, dear young people, all protocol observed. I'm very happy to see all of you joining us today. And I want to thank you for your efforts to advance the implementation of the youth, peace and security agenda. I'm grateful to the government of Qatar, Finland and Colombia for hosting this event in collaboration with the United Nations and youth organizations. Our world is facing profound challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, rising conflicts, discrimination, the digital divide, the erosion of civil space and declining trust. And young people are not only heavily affected by this crisis, they are on the front lines for action and solutions. I salute young people around the world for raising their voices in the streets and online and standing up for climate action, gender equality, racial and social justice, and so much more. And youth must be at the center of efforts to address these challenges and build more peaceful, just, and sustainable societies. That is the spirit of my report on our common agenda, to work with young people recognizing the pivotal role of youth as designers of your own as well as our shared future. We need to ensure that young people have a seat at the table, forging inclusive solutions that combine peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. I salute young people for already stepping up and leading by example. You represent a source of innovation, ideas, and solutions. From monitoring ceasefires to mediation, humanitarian assistance, and post-conflict healing, young people are engaging and mobilizing broader constituencies by using traditional platforms as well as new technologies. Time and again, young people have been at the forefront of efforts to build and sustain peace, including through activism and peaceful protests. And many member states are taking steps to harness that potential as a positive force for building peaceful and tolerant societies. However, opportunities for meaningful participation remain insufficient. Numerous young peace builders, especially young women, report that their participation is not welcomed by the public or those in positions of power. The international community must step up its support to young people in these efforts. The Peacebuilding Commission has provided young peace builders a platform to present their work and recommendations. And the Peacebuilding Fund includes a youth promotion initiative to support youth, peace, and the security agenda. Last year, we provided nearly $26 million in projects implemented together with civil society partners. But we need to expand that investment with additional and more accessible resources to support youth-led efforts. Reports of threats and human rights violations against young peace builders and human rights defenders are also of grave concern. We must strengthen human rights protections, safeguard civic space, and ensure an environment that enables young people to meaningfully and safely participate in peace and security efforts. In this regard, the UN will develop a Youth in Politics Index to track the opening of political space in countries around the world that younger generations are so clearly demanding. Finally, as we strive to recover from the pandemic, we must address the root causes of the exclusion of young people and deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. We must invest in providing prospects and opportunities for young people, especially young women, and including through education. Dear friends, young people are not only citizens with equal rights, but also powerful agents for change whose voices must be fully heard. I'm pleased that your work ahead of this conference has already produced two important documents: a set of guidelines for member states to operationalize the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, and a 5-year strategy on youth-inclusive peace processes. I am confident that these resources will make a meaningful difference in advancing the agenda in every country. You can count on me, you can count on the United Nations to continue to amplify young people's voices and support your efforts towards a peaceful, sustainable, and inclusive future. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. Now, please allow me to welcome our distinguished panel of speakers to join me for an insightful discussion. Let me start by turning to one of our young peace builders from South Sudan, Anna Maneno. Anna, there are a number of ministers, decision makers, and government representatives in our virtual audience today. So please do kick us off by sharing what can governments and institutions do to make our institutions more responsive and inclusive for young people like yourself.
Good evening from South Sudan. My name is Anna Maneno, a young peace builder from the Republic of South Sudan, and the Future Africa Leaders Award winner for the year 2021. I am privileged and honored to be sharing in with the United Nations Secretary General and other important dignitaries from all over the world. My fellow young peace builders, let the protocol be observed. I'm going to be sharing in as a spoken word. Born into war, a struggle of freedom, spreading violence like wildfire, rains of gunshots in every corner, pools of blood fertilizing the land. I clearly remember when we were pushed into holes to shelter us from bombs falling from gunships and anti-noms. Oh, Bashir, Itafel and Katulu. A trauma of witnessing fresh human meat. The pain of losing loved ones. Oh, regret in destroyed education. Stress of growing up away from home as a refugee. We are youth who grew up in violence. So are we violent? In 2011, South Sudan attained its independence. I thought we arrived at the everlasting peace and freedom, but I was wrong. Our land still bleeds. Violence is the order of the day. I want to be the change my world and my country wants to see. Where youth are a powerful force to drive peace and development, but where they are used as tool of destruction. Leaders exploiting our weaknesses, turning us into agents of war and not that of peace. And so are the world youths dying in violent extremism, political conflicts, and communal violence. The need for change hurts my soul. Oh, how I adore my nation. A beautiful land indeed, but where is peace? Why has my land starved herself of harmony, yet her children are able to build the ruined walls? The ambitions of seeing the next generation free of war inspires me for peace, and I have become the peace. I am the force to drive world peace, and so is every youth in the world. The political leaders only recognize our role in fighting wars and not the role in bringing peace. I am ignored. I am not allowed to attend peace negotiations and sit on the same table with political leaders, but their decisions affect my life. But not anymore. I have stood up for my rights. I am not a tool of violence. But not anymore. I have stood up for my rights. I am not a tool of violence. I am the peace that has to reign in my nation because I am tired of witnessing my sisters and brothers suffer. Seeing girls run for marriages due to hopelessness. Thinking or deciding for a better life but suffer violence. How I hate gender-based violence. Ignorance I see, sensitizing communities is my ambition. It's my mandate to reach out, making them understand the beauty of peace, the importance of humanity, desire a new form of patriotism grounded in our shared humanity, reaching an individual, then a group, then a nation, and now a region. Peacemaker, I decided. The urge for a peaceful globe is burning inside me. I have ignited peace in my community. I am the influence the youth need to end violence and join my bandwagon of peace. I mediate conflicts from family to the community and to the nation at large. The youth are a powerful drive to change in the world. I beg you, accept our role. Bring us in and let us expand our table. Let's negotiate peace together. It will last forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for sharing your inspiring poem with us. I'm sure your message was heard loud and clear. Now, Now let me turn to the First Lady of Colombia, Her Excellency Maria Juliana Ruiz. Your Excellency, Colombia is a country where young people played a crucial role in the peace process. How do you see their role today, and how are they changing the course of the history of your country? Over to you.
Hello to everyone. Hello to you, Hayatma. I'm deeply honored to take part in the high-level global conference on youth inclusive peace processes. And let me greet with sincere admiration United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, other officials, friends, of course, our host Qatar, excellencies, delegations from Finland and distinguished member states. And I'd like to transmit a heartfelt acknowledgement to youth leaders as the one we had just heard, and all these peacemakers around the globe, because you are a source of inspiration for all of us. As you know, we were honored to be the host of the preparatory meeting of this high-level encounter last December. And though we wish these events would have been face-to-face, we are definitely grateful to share this opportunity to meet today. So about the question, Hayatma, it really fascinates me somehow, because this is exactly what has been happening gradually in Colombia for some years now. And let me start by saying that our actual president was elected as the youngest president in recent history in Colombia, and that more than 75% of our population is younger than 45 years old. So no doubt young people are changing the course of our country's history. And now to get deeply into your question, you must know that Colombia has been working very hard to overcome historic conflicts and building the grounds for sustainable reconciliation. We have been doing this especially paying attention on the youth, and even as Secretary General just mentioned, taking special attention to what gender equality means, and this to pave the path for them in order to fulfill their dreams and to fly finally. So we've seen and heard young people progressively reaching out and taking action to lead the change in their communities, in their territories, expressing their voices and organizing somehow. Just playing decisive roles in negotiation and conflict resolution, something really important in our country. And therefore, our task as decision makers and officers that have this power of leading has been to listen to their requests and proposals and to reach agreements and set accords. We do believe on the power of sitting in common grounds. So we have decided to make drastic changes in the way the institutions connect with the youngsters and to expand their interaction with different actors from all spheres of society. This is basically based on two main words: connecting and compromising. And personally, and I can say even from a government's perspective, we consider young people as key actors in terms of co-creation and co-responsibility. Two words that you have also heard me repeating several times. And it's not only because we see the youngsters and the youth as beneficiaries. We also see them as doers in establishing fertile grounds for reconciliation and stabilization mechanisms by being part of the solutions and the changes they want to see. So in the past 3 years, we've done so much with the youth. And if you allow me, I will highlight 3 main areas. First one is creating bridges, as I just said, between institutions and youth organizations through the National Youth System that was launched almost a year and a half ago, and which basically strengthened youth participation as policymakers. We just recently had the elections for the municipal youth councilors. This happened for the first time in our country. Second, we've established Sacudete, our national youth strategy that aimed at fostering talents and building essential skills in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, cultivating sustainable and happy lives projects, and as I like to say. And this is based on 3 pillars, extremely important for the youth, what we call the 3 E's, which are education, employment, and entrepreneurship. And the third one is that we were able to build somehow a youth policy document that was built together with young people, that was approved with a 10-year period of implementation based on 146 actions and a budget surpassing $8.5 billion. This document was achieved thanks to the Pact for the Colombian Youth, which was a participation mechanism unprecedented in the history of Colombia. And that was done also taking into account young people's perspective to improve decision-making processes. So by mentioning this, I would also like to say that we definitely support in a determined way the global youth, peace, and security agenda. And we will continue to push forward the resolution 2250 and 2419 adopted by the United Nations. And our commitment was also renewed to Secretary General Antonio Guterres during his recent visit to Colombia in 2021 to monitor the progress of 5 years of implementation of our peace accords. So probably my final message, and to respond your question, I would say that this is the legacy of positive change and historic transformation processes that young people have inspired us to endorse, cultivating the sustainable development goals through inclusive governance models, and seeing long-term initiatives and programs for future generations. Definitely spreading their wings and reaching their dreams. No doubt making history.
Thank you very much, Madam First Lady. Now, similar to Colombia hosting the preparatory meeting of this conference, Finland hosted the first global symposium on youth in peace processes back in 2019, which kick-started the process that brings us here. So we have with us today, joining from Helsinki, His Excellency Pekka Haavisto, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Affairs of Finland. Minister, we would like to hear from you what progress has been made since the symposium you hosted in 2019 on advancing the youth, peace and security agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it was very impressive to hear the Anna from South Sudan, your very impressive contribution, and also from the First Lady of Colombia. Thank you for that, and thank you very much, and greetings from snowy Helsinki. Allow me to begin by saying how excited we are in Finland for this high-level global conference on youth inclusive peace processes. And I wish to thank our host Qatar and Colombia, both our close partners in promoting the 2250 agenda with the invaluable support of the United Nations Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Search for Common Ground, and all the other key partners. I look very much forward to an in-depth dialogue with you all on the important agenda of youth inclusion, and I'm very happy to see so many youth representatives taking part and hopefully taking the driver's seat in the discussion. Personally, I welcome more direct dialogue between decision makers and young people. We have come a long way from the first international symposium on youth participation in peace processes in 2019 in Helsinki, and we need to keep taking these steps together for the youth agenda. I would like to thank and congratulate the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security and Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth for drafting the 2 proposed outcome documents, the guidelines in support of the country-level operationalization of the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, and the 5-year strategy on strengthening youth-inclusive peace processes. These important initiatives push our joint agenda forward, and we have ensured the results are visible. The need for concrete action is a call I have strongly heard from the Finnish youth lately. Our youth hold us politicians accountable for action, whether in climate issues or inclusive societies, just to name a few themes, and I find this activity excellent. Finland published her first national action plan, Youth, Peace and Security, last fall as the first country in the world. This was a first important step for us. The Finnish action plan sets our commonly agreed concrete goals and outlines methods for the implementation of the 2250 agenda in our national context. Drafting the action plan was deemed a very positive experience, and we note that the process itself was as important as the end product itself. At all stages, Finnish youth organizations and youth were strongly involved, manifesting commitment, co-ownership, proactiveness and expertise, all vital elements. As Finland now embarks on the next key step, namely implementing the national action plan, the lessons learned from the drafting process will guide us forward. This applies specifically in the power of cooperation. We have already recognized that the implementation of the Finnish action plan will require new thinking. The demand for an intersectional approach and the adaptation of new technologies will challenge our existing thinking, but I believe for the better. We trust that our youth will come up with many of the innovative solutions that will be required. We live in a turbulent world and joint work for peace must continue. That is why I want to also emphasize the critical and hopefully continuing support for young peacemakers at all levels. Countries such as Myanmar, Afghanistan and Iraq are examples where Finland has cooperated with local youth actors working for peace. Before closing, Madam Chair, I would like to encourage all youth representatives participating to the forum to stay curious and active. We need to hear your voices, and I know Finland remains ready to keep learning from others as we go along together. Finland will continue to be an active champion of the 2250 agenda, both nationally and internationally. The Doha Forum will give us a new opportunity to take this work forward. I thank you and wish everyone a successful forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Unfortunately, due to other pressing commitments, the Secretary General has to leave us now, but you can be rest assured that as his envoy, myself and other UN representatives in this conversation will continue to listen to you and take your input into the work that we are doing. Thank you very much, Secretary General. Now, let me turn to one of our young peace builders from Afghanistan, Mohammed Yahya Kwani. Yahya, there are a lot of policymakers that are joining us virtually today. Can you please elaborate a little bit more on how meaningful and inclusive processes be created so young people can play an active and positive role in peace processes at the country level?
Thank you very much, UN Youth Envoy Jadman. First of all, please allow me to express my gratitude to all the organizers of the Global Conference on Youth Inclusive Peace Process. I'm extremely honored to be attending this important global conference that brings together friends of YPS. Before that, I want to share a personal story of mine. And based on that, I want to answer your question about how we can create more meaningful, inclusive peace processes, spaces for young people. In early 2020, I co-founded the National Youth Consensus for Peace, the first and largest coalition of more than 214 national organizations in Afghanistan, in response to the lack of spaces for meaningful participation of young people in the peace process. In fact, we made a lot of progress at the consensus. We presented the first national youth resolution, lobbied with the international community, engaged the grassroots, and built regional partners. Make no mistake, it wasn't simple at all. We had no budget, no physical office, and we were working in the wake of a spike in targeted assassinations. Even at one point, a group of our members in Badakhshan province of Afghanistan were conversing with me about peace in the heart of an active war. During the entire discussion, I could hear the roars of gunfire and explosion in the background. But there was one hope, one driving force among all of us, and that was the hope. The same hope I had and I have while leaving Afghanistan. With that said, following the failure of Afghan peace process and collapse of the government on August 13, 2021, I boarded the last flight out of Afghanistan to Qatar, then Germany, and finally to the United States, thanks to the incredible people who have been supporting me this entire time. But when I left Afghanistan with a backpack, leaving my pupil, the consensus, my family, and all dreams behind, I hope that one hope to save my life and continue my cause for healing the wounds of my country. I was living in a limbo and moved during the past 4 months, but I still consider myself lucky compared to many others, like the mental, physical, financial, legal costs that are being borne by my generation and countless others across the country, the tales of pain and loss, and the current resistance of young Afghan women who are demanding freedom, breed, and work made me even stronger and determined. Now I'm not only hopeful, but more committed to our cause. With that said, I can say that all of this gives me hope and my generation hope, as does the youth, peace, and security. So YPS agenda gives us hope because it makes us feel heard, seen, and provide a path to be engaged in shaping the future and leading present. This is what my hope is for the next 5 years. About the question that how we can create more meaningful spaces, I can say that our gathering here today is yet again a recognition of youth leadership, and our cause, the approach to our cause is very simple. We can empower youth, we can create spaces for them by empowering them, consulting with them, and providing them the spaces to be engaged directly in decision makings. So I therefore urge our leaders to translate their goodwill into concrete commitments, mandated into action with specific milestones and funding to achieve those milestones with an increased sense of urgency. This is very important, in fact, because while we have a strong UN resolutions, they're clear and very strong, we still need national level commitments from the governments that can come from a national framework or a national action plan that can allow young people to be engaged in country level and regional level decision-making and peace processes, and that will contribute too much to our global cause of inclusion of youth in the peace process, and we can provide them the safest space. It's not only about the young people. I can share a great aspect to our leaders as well, and I'm asking them to think of their own legacy leaving behind and how they should be remembered by young people who are struggling today around the world. The YPS agenda is a key to unlock that legacy, and let's not waste this unique opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Yahya, for your very precise and practical remarks. Now, let me go to Anna and Yahya again. In 30 seconds, I would like both of you to tell our policymakers and fellow young people in the virtual conference today, what do you hope to take out, or what do you hope will be concrete results that will be coming out of 2 days of this high-level global conference on youth-inclusive peace processes? Anna, quickly to you.
Okay, once again, I am privileged and honored to be here. This platform is an inspiration for us to do more, because for me to get to win in the Future Africa Leaders Award last year, which was done in Nigeria, it means I have been given a responsibility to do more. I use my talent to advocate for peace. I use my influence reaching out to communities, because I do not only use the media to talk about peace, but I have a door-to-door campaign that I use for talking about peace. And I know with this platform alone, I will get platforms to talk to more youths, because my plan, my agenda for 2022 is reaching out to different schools, talking to them about different things, the patriotism and the love. I think that alone will make them understand the importance of peace.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. So Anna wishes to take out from this conversation more and more platforms to advocate for peace with other young people. Yahya, what is it that you wish to take out of this conference, and what you wish will be the outcomes of this conference?
Once again, thank you so much. Well, honestly, we all have many hopes and expectations. Personally, I would like to hear how other different countries are currently implementing the youth peace and security agenda, and how young people, especially in grassroots levels, have been involved in its implementation. Besides, I'm expecting to have, and I'm hoping to have, new member states' commitments on implementing YPS agenda. That's very important for us. Like Afghan young men and women across the world, young people are actively working to make a change and support peace building and peace process. And they're calling for a more formal recognition of their efforts in leadership in the ongoing peace negotiations and decision makings. To emphasize for implementing our previous commitments and making new ones, we don't need to redefine the inclusion, or we don't need to start from scratches. As I stated earlier, there are already existing YPS coalitions, and we have a strong UN resolutions, which makes our milestones easier to achieve.
Thank you very much, Yahya. So Yahya wishes to take out of this conference more commitments and concrete commitments by member states and sharing of lessons learned. Thank you very much to our distinguished panel of speakers for joining us today this morning from morning in New York to kickstart our conversation. Dear young people, excellencies, colleagues, we've come now to the end of the official opening segment of the program, and I hope that you found inspiration and hope in the interventions of our speakers. Before we say goodbye, I'm excited to announce that today we will be launching two important documents which participants will be learning about and deliberating throughout this conference. First, the Implementing Youth Peace and Security Agenda at the country level, a guide for public officials. So this is particularly for the public officials who are joining us today to take a look at this guidance and take concrete steps to implement youth peace and security in their countries. And the second output that you will see just on the screen is a 5-year strategic action plan for youth inclusive peace processes. You will see the link to download these two important documents also in the chat box, and you will also find them on my social media at UN Youth Envoy and the website un.org/UN Youth Envoy. Please do read these documents, familiarize yourself with them, and we will be diving deep into both of these documents throughout the next 2 days. We will now go to resume the rest of the program, which was supposed to start at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I thank you for joining us, and please keep engaging in the sessions, but also particularly on social media using the hashtags #YouthForPeace and #YPS Conference. I wish you successful and exciting deliberations. Thank you very much.